80 seconds. That's all it took to erase $2 billion from the face of the Earth. At 2:14 a.m. on November 29, 2025, a Russian air defense commander was screaming, "Targets intercepted," into his radio, celebrating what he believed was proof that his S-400 battalion was untouchable inside its legendary 400-kilometer radar bubble. He was grinning, his crew was high-fiving. They had just swatted 11 Ukrainian missiles out of the sky, and they felt like gods of modern warfare. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that 48 silent Ukrainian assassins had been hovering directly above their heads for the past 90 minutes, watching, waiting, and counting down to the exact moment those protective launch tube covers would slide open. When those covers finally opened, exposing the fuel-filled noses of fresh missiles to the cold night air, a sound began filling the darkness. Not the roar of incoming artillery, not the scream of jet engines. It was a buzz, a high-pitched, angry buzz, like a swarm of hornets descending from heaven. In exactly 80 seconds, 840 tons of Russia's most sophisticated military hardware would become a smoking crater, and the myth of the invincible S-400 would die in a fireball visible from space. Let's rewind 14 minutes to understand how we got here. The strategic situation over Kupiansk had spiraled into an absolute nightmare for Moscow. For weeks, Ukrainian precision strikes had been systematically hunting Russian air defense systems, peeling back their protective layers until frontline troops were left completely exposed to aerial bombardment. The Kremlin wasn't just worried, they were desperate. They didn't need to plug the gap, they needed to slam the door shut. So at 2 a.m., Russia pushed all its chips to the center of the table. Under cover of a freezing November night, 4 brand-new S-400 battalions, the absolute crown jewels of the Russian military, rolled into position just 35 miles from the zero line. This was staggering arrogance. They were parking $2 billion worth of irreplaceable strategic assets within artillery range to create an impenetrable 249-mile no-fly zone that would ground the Ukrainian Air Force for the entire winter. The conditions seemed divinely designed for a stealth deployment. Temperature had plunged to 6 degrees below zero, and dense, blinding fog hung 180 feet above the ground. To Russian commanders, this weather was a gift from heaven. They believed the fog would blind Ukrainian satellites and ground enemy drones. They believed they were the hunters, setting the ultimate trap. They had absolutely no idea they had just parked inside one. At 2:14 a.m. and 30 seconds, the silence shattered. But the first blow didn't come from drones overhead, it came screaming from the horizon. Across the Sumy front, dispersed over 50 miles of snow-covered forests, the fire control computers of 4 HIMARS and 2 M270 launchers synchronized and executed a time-on-target strike. This means rockets fired from different locations at different speeds would all impact at the exact same millisecond. The target? The Pantsir S-1 bodyguards protecting the S-400s. 24 M30A1 rockets entered their terminal phase. Russian Pantsir crews saw them on radar, but were immediately overwhelmed. Their systems were designed to track 2 or 3 targets, not a synchronized wall of 24 projectiles arriving at Mach 2.5. The rockets detonated 30 feet in the air, exactly as designed. Each warhead unleashed 182,000 pre-formed tungsten fragments. Do the math, over 4 million tungsten bullets, each harder than steel, saturating the convoy like a shotgun from God. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Delicate phased array radar shredded, optical sensors blinded, thin armor perforated like wet cardboard. In 80 seconds, 9 of 12 Pantsers were burning wrecks. Inside the S-400 command vehicles, screens erupted in cascading red warnings. They were now deaf and blind to short-range threats. Their bodyguards were dead. Panic spread like wildfire. The Russian commander made a desperate decision that would seal everyone's fate. He ordered the S-400s to activate main radars and open fire blindly, hoping to intercept whatever came next. He just signed their death warrant. As the Pantsers burned, surviving S-400 batteries roared to life. Massive 92N6E gravestone radar spun up, blasting megawatt-class energy into the sky, frantically searching for the artillery that had massacred their bodyguards. The Ukrainian trap entered Phase 2, the bait. From deep in the rear, Ukraine launched 14 MGM-140B ATACMS missiles. These weren't subtle weapons. They were massive Mach 3 ballistic sledgehammers screaming toward the Russian position. Inside command vehicles, screens lit up with terrifying clarity. "Ballistic threat, 14 inbound," operators shouted as adrenaline spiked. This was the moment the S-400 was built for. This was why each battalion cost $500 million. The commander slammed his fist on the console. "Engage, clear the sky." The automation took over with terrifying efficiency. Hydraulic tubes elevated to vertical. Protective caps blew off with synchronized thuds. Then the ground shook. 24 48 N6E3 interceptors erupted from silos in a ripply sequence, riding columns of blinding white fire, accelerating to Mach 6 in seconds. The roar tore the freezing fog apart as they punched holes through the atmosphere. High above the clouds, the duel began. ATACMS missiles dove at Mach 3, twisting to avoid interception. But S-400 interceptors were relentless, pulling 30G turns that would turn human pilots to jelly. Fragmentation warheads detonated in calculated paths, creating walls of supersonic shrapnel. 11 Ukrainian missiles were obliterated, burning confetti raining from 50,000 feet. Inside the command vehicle, tension broke. "Targets destroyed. We have splash on 11. The shield is holding." The crew erupted, high-fiving, adrenaline flooding their systems. They were euphoric. They believed they'd won the duel. They believed they were untouchable gods of the sky. They were catastrophically wrong. They hadn't won. They'd taken the bait. On the ground, S-400 computers automatically prepared for the next engagement. To reload, the system slid open heavy protective covers of the next 10 launch tubes. For exactly 3.2 seconds, the delicate fuel-filled noses of fresh missiles were exposed to the cold night air. This was the spawn kill window, the tiny gap between celebration and rearmament when the world's most advanced air defense system was completely defenseless from above. 60 feet overhead, visibility had changed dramatically. The massive thermal release from Russian missiles had burned a vertical tunnel straight through the fog layer. Through this cylinder of clear air, 48 Ukrainian drone operators saw the tubes open with high-definition clarity. This was the green light. They didn't hesitate. 48 electric motors screamed from idle to 30,000 RPM instantly. The sound was like angry hornets descending from heaven. The drones didn't fly, they dove, gravity-assisted kamikaze runs, aimed with surgical precision straight down the throats of open Russian silos. The crews on the ground were still grinning when the sound changed. That high-pitched, angry buzz cut through everything. The commander's smile vanished. He froze. "What is that sound?" He looked up through dissipating smoke and saw them. Dozens of dark silhouettes diving from the fog like demons from hell. Drones, directly above. His scream was drowned by 48 electric motors. It was too late for guns, too late to lower tubes, too late for anything. 9 drones found their marks with supernatural precision. They didn't just hit trucks, they flew inside the open launch tubes. Shape charges detonated directly against warheads of waiting missiles. The reaction was instantaneous. The result wasn't an explosion, it was a geological event. 36 Russian missiles, each packed with 300 pounds of high explosives and nearly a ton of solid rocket fuel, detonated simultaneously at ground zero. 9 launch vehicles didn't explode, they atomized. A fireball rose 500 feet, turning freezing night into noon. The shockwave hit remaining Pantsir trucks like a physical hammer, flipping 30-ton vehicles onto their sides like toys. The Russian radio network went silent. In 4 seconds, the pride of Russian aerospace forces became a smoking crater, and the drones hadn't even finished their run. The surviving commander crawled from his overturned vehicle, dazed, ears ringing, face blackened by soot. He looked around and saw apocalypse. Half his regiment was erased. But through smoke, he spotted 6 launchers still standing. Panic overtook logic. He assumed this was a missile strike, not drones. His only thought was emptying magazines before they got hit too. He grabbed his radio. "Fire everything! Launch at will! Get those missiles out now!" Desperate, frantic, fatal. The remaining crews obeyed. Hydraulic pumps whined, massive tubes jerked upward, heavy steel caps slid open. High above, 6 Ukrainian drone pilots were watching. They'd been holding position, resisting the urge to join the first wave. discipline was everything. They saw fresh tubes opening, vulnerable warheads exposed, same fatal mistake repeated. Targets acquired, the flight lead whispered. Send them to hell. 6 drones peeled from formation. These pilots were artists, adjusting trajectories to compensate for thermal updrafts from burning wreckage. Russian crews frantically initiated launch sequences. System armed, firing in 3, 2. They never reached 1. 6 drones streaked through smoke. 6 impacts. Shaped charges detonated into exposed propellant. Chain reaction. 6 massive explosions ripped through remaining launchers. Steel tubes peeled back like bananas. Shockwaves flattened surrounding trees. The count went from 6 operational launchers to 0. The commander dropped his radio. Not a single operational tube remained. The iron shield of Russia was gone. The sky was wide open. The no-fly zone was dismantled. The shield shattered. Now the executioner arrived. From Sumy, 18 ATACMS missiles screamed toward the position. This time, the sky was empty. No interceptors rising on pillars of fire. No Pantsirs filling air with tungsten. Russian screens painted 18 inbound tracks, but not a single button remained to push. 17 missiles entered terminal phase. They didn't arc like artillery. They screamed down vertically at Mach 3. Top attack profile. Their targets weren't the launchers. Those were already scrap. They targeted the brain, the 9.2 and 6E gravestone radars, the $200 million eyes of the system. Destruction was absolute. 4 massive fireballs erupted in sequence. Kinetic energy obliterated radar vehicles, throwing twisted dishes hundreds of feet into the air like frisbees. The eyes of the Russian army were gouged out. What remained broke completely. 6 surviving vehicles fled toward the highway, but you can't outrun drones already chasing you. 10 remaining FPV drones, battery warnings flashing red, hunted fleeing trucks like wolves chasing wounded deer. A fuel tanker took a drone to the rear axle, jackknifed, exploded in a rolling fireball. A command truck swerved into a ditch as a drone slammed into its cab. 6 final explosions ended the convoy. 2 reserve ATACMS missiles delivered the coup de grace, slamming into the ammunition depot 3 kilometers away. A column of fire shot 800 feet skyward. Secondary explosions shattered windows in villages 10 miles away. Silence returned to Kupiansk, but the war had changed forever. In 13 minutes, Russia lost 4 elite air defense battalions, nearly $2 billion of hardware. But money was the least of Moscow's problems. With S-400s gone, the 249-mile denial bubble burst. For 3 weeks, skies over Kharkiv were wide open. Ukrainian jets grounded for months were suddenly free. They pounded Russian supply lines with complete impunity. The psychological impact was worse. This operation shattered the myth of S-400 invincibility. The system designed to stop hypersonic missiles and stealth fighters was dismantled by hobby drones. Moscow issued a humiliating directive unprecedented in modern warfare. Before opening launch tubes, all S-400 crews must visually inspect airspace directly above using assault rifles. Operators of the world's most advanced missile system now stick their heads out like terrified prairie dogs before firing. The brutal math tells everything. Ukraine spent roughly $48 million on ATACMS missiles and $25,000 on 48 drones. Total, under $50 million. They erased $2 billion in Russian assets. That's a 40-to-1 return on investment. Being expensive doesn't mean invincible. A $2 billion shield can be shattered by a $500 hammer if you know exactly where to hit. In the end, it wasn't about money. It was about patience, intelligence, and courage to wait in the fog while the giant slept. If you enjoyed watching a superpower get outsmarted by a toy store, smash that like button and subscribe. Next week, I'll tell you about a battle even crazier than this one. Until then, Slava Ukraini!